I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a story out of one of this nation's premier universities that is very troubling to the Jewish community. The university is NYU, New York University, in the heart of Lower Manhattan, where a growing student movement exists that seems to be looking for economic and cultural boycotts, divestment, and sanctions, BDS, against the state of Israel. And it's become so virulent as to create serious strains in the university's student body. The issue turned ugly on the NYU campus when a referendum at the student union calling on NYU to join the global BDS movement passed with a 67% majority, calling on NYU again to boycott Israeli institutions and companies until Israel ends its military occupation of the West Bank. A second referendum calling for an academic boycott of Israel also passed with a 58% vote in favor. These two referendums calling for boycotts of Israel were actually the work of the Graduate Student Organizing Committee, known as the GSOC, which is a union of graduate students employed by NYU. And here's what the GSOC's resolution asks individuals to commit to. It says, I will personally adhere to the academic boycott of Israel by refusing to take part in any research conferences, events, exchange programs, publications, or other activities that are sponsored by or require official affiliation with the Israeli government or Israeli academic institutions. Well, what does this all say about anti-Israel sentiment on the NYU campus, and how are pro-Israel students feeling and reacting to the passage of resolutions calling on NYU to boycott Israel? For some answers, we're pleased to be joined by someone intimately involved with Jewish life at NYU, the extremely popular and successful executive director of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Student Life at NYU, and someone you've had the chance to meet many times before on JBS, Rabbi Yehuda Sarna. Yehuda, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
So, first of all, Yehuda, what's going on? What's really happening in terms of this movement that is seeking to establish a boycott of Israel on the NYU campus?
Well, Mark, first of all, thank you for having me. One of the key things to understand here is who exactly is pushing for this. Now, union politics are perhaps lesser known to the organized Jewish community than university politics, but here we're really talking about a vote that took place in the union. This is a union of workers, graduate student workers, who are, as you said, employed by NYU. Now, what I came to realize is that there is a movement, if you will, among unions such as these, unions of graduate student workers, and this movement is called AWDU, Academic Workers for a Democratic Union. So if you go online and if you Google AWDU NYU, and you look at the Facebook page of this group, and if you look at what it is they stand for, their platform, you'll notice that they refer to themselves as a militant organization. That's not my word. That's their word. Mm-hmm. They're referring to themselves as a militant organization. This bothered me. It shocked me. It surprised me. And in fact, what I did is I looked at other AWDU chapters on other universities. None of the other organizations, none of the other chapters use this word. And it worries me that a group that identifies itself as militant is the one who's advancing this resolution.
In what sense, Yehuda, does that surprise you? Wouldn't it seem to you that if there is an organization that is pushing their university to join the BDS movement, they probably do have a militant character to them, yes?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are many peace activists, for example, who believe that the important thing is to pressure countries, companies through peaceful means, and would see boycotting or divesting through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised by the use of the word. Listen, I don't think they're walking around with guns, but I think using that kind of language to describe your activities is very shocking, especially in a university context. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
can you imagine? Can you imagine a pro-Israel organization on campus or caucus or movement in a university context saying, "Yeah, we are a militant group. We believe in strategic militancy." Or
Mm-hmm.
if there was a group committed to Second Amendment rights, or a college chapter of the NRA saying we believe in strategic militancy, it would not be tolerated, and it would not be looked upon as anything that's a benefit.
You're absolutely
I,
right.
I wouldn't want my university, and I don't think anyone would want their university being a battleground of multiple groups who consider themselves militant. So what I'm trying to do is just to raise awareness and raise concern, not so much about the BDS resolution that passed. Frankly, I think it'll have no impact. Undergraduate students barely heard about it. The campaign barely affected them, hasn't poisoned the atmosphere. I'm worried about the growth of groups that on the far left that see themselves as a militant organization. I'm worried about the emboldening and empowering of these kind of groups.
I understand it's a very important distinction you've made. But wait, Yehuda, are there any Jewish graduate students that you know of who've been part of this movement to push NYU to BDS?
Of course, there are. There are Jews. There are Israelis. This is not a. It's not a Palestinian movement. It's not an Islamic movement. It is not a KKK movement. This is not. It's not the way it's appeared here. It's not an anti-Semitic move. There are many Jewish students, many Israeli, and some Israeli students, and I would not refer to it at all in this case as anti-Semitic in the least. That it's a group of far left, radical left students, and it's not just BDS that they are focusing on. They're also focusing on boycotting and divesting from fossil fuel companies because of their concern for the environment, and a host of other issues. It's not. This is about the far left. It's not about growing anti-Semitism.
Okay. Uh, what about the undergraduate students? And I really should ask you, I know you work with undergraduate students. You also work with graduate students. Do you know any of these individuals personally?
I've met one or two people who were involved
Are they
in
part of the Hillel Bronfman Center?
the graduate students. No, well, look, from the get-go, most of our footprint is in the undergraduate student
Right.
space. That's where we're most active. Graduate students, so many of them are part-time. They don't live nearby, and they're not really a population that we've been able to establish a broad reach in. And so I don't know many of the people who are active in AWDU personally. I've met one or two of them, maybe once or twice, but these are not people who are very active here. No.
Okay. I want you to help me clarify where you stand on this, because it sounds to me like while this concerns you, it only concerns you so much. There was a piece in the Jewish Week where you were quoted, and they have you saying, "I've never seen anything like this. The level of discord within a student union is unprecedented." And you are quoted as being astonished. That's the word in quotes around your piece. You're being quoted in the Jewish Week. I want to know, to what extent does this astonish you? How would you describe the discord that you're referring to in this Jewish Week piece?
The astonishment really comes from the use of the word militant and the belief in strategic militancy. In all my time here, I've been here almost 14 years. The union actually has not been around as long as I've been here. I've never seen the union so divided, and I think, and certainly not with these kind of contested resolutions. So, but I would say the element of surprise, of shock, and even of outrage on my part, I would say is that there's a group that's describing itself as militant, a militant group, who is trying to push the union in a certain direction, and instead of focusing on workers' rights, on healthcare, or on the other, on getting rid of hidden fees that universities sometimes uh, charge graduate students, instead of focusing on the issues that materially concern graduate student workers at NYU, it just seems like this union has been overtaken by a band of militants.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm mostly concerned about.
Okay. And you also seem to be saying that their agenda goes beyond Israel, that somehow they see themselves as fighting for the underdog in areas of justice necessary for the world. And one of the things that upsets them is Israel's occupation of the West Bank, but they're not a one issue group. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. There's a constellation of radical left issues that they're trying to take on, and the organism through which they're trying to take these on are the union. They're upset at the middle management and senior management of the parent union under which they're subsumed. They feel like the middle management, the senior management is weak. They're not really fighting. They're not ideological enough. And I believe in time they're trying to move up. So
Hmm.
what they do in order to increase their power base is initiate all kinds of controversial resolutions because they know that these resolutions will encourage people to join the union and vote. Now, once they have those inflated numbers, they can say, we don't just represent a union of 300, 400 people, we represent a union of 1,000 people, of
Hmm.
1,200 people. And that gives them more power. It's a
Okay.
cynical view, but I think that this BDS vote was much more about gaining the AWDU power than it is about increasing benefit to Palestinians.
Fascinating. Okay, Yehuda, you're being watched and listened to by both our Jewish audience and non-Jewish audience all over the country. I know within the Jewish community there is this serious concern that BDS is overtaking the college campus. I say the college campus as if it's one large conglomerate, but when you talk to Jews who are worried about BDS, they make it sound as if BDS is infecting college students throughout the country. You said earlier in this conversation that the undergraduates may not even be aware of this graduate union's actions. I want you to talk in general. You and I have done a little bit about this when you've been in the studio for L'chaim. What do you feel these days about the Jewish student body and the larger college body in terms of anti-Israel sentiment, the BDS? Do you see it growing at NYU in the undergraduate level? And in general, what's your feel for it day to day as you go to, as you interact with these students at NYU?
Well, there's certainly much more activity favoring BDS now than there has been um, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I think the Gaza war being twinned in 2014, being twinned that same summer with what happened in Ferguson, and there being a confluence of interests among activists on the left between fighting against police brutality and then fighting against Israeli brutality. Uh, that twinning has kind of locked in um, on the part of some a kind of natural support for Palestinians, or I would say really opposition to Israeli military, and that's not something that's so easy to combat. Look, my view, and others might disagree with me, um, is that as support for Israel has become more partisan, than it's ever been, at least than I can remember. That is, with the right in this country favoring Israel more than the left generally. It makes sense as these dynamics shift for the far left to take up the issue of Israel from the opposite standpoint, right? The far left is going to be most bitterly opposed to anything conservative. And because of that, it makes sense that it's picking it up. I don't see this as a Palestinian nationalist movement. I don't see this as an Arab nationalist movement. When you look at the people who are most active in the BDS movement, from what I've seen, is that it basically reflects whoever is active in leftist causes, and far left causes. Some of those people are going to be Jewish. Some of those people are going to be Muslim, and many of them are going to be neither. But those are the activists, and those are the issues, again, because of the internal political dynamic. As Israel becomes more of a partisan issue, with the right supporting it more, and you just listen to the Republican, the establishment Republican candidates, and you'll hear them sounding that note. It makes sense that the far left is going to pick that up and be bitterly anti-Israel.
Mm-hmm. All right. I understand that analysis. What I don't get yet is a feel for what you experience on the NYU campus. On a scale of 1 to 10, Yehuda, if you compare what you experienced 3 years ago and what you're experiencing today, on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset are you? 1 being not upset very much at all, 10, BDS at NYU upsets you. Scale of 1 to 10.
I would say we went from a 2 to a 4, but meaning a few years ago, the level of activity upset me very little. Now it upsets me more, but it's nowhere near what it is on schools that are that are really campus schools. We're an urban school, schools that are built around a quad, where anything that happens, everyone hears about it. Mm-hmm. Those schools are much easier to disrupt. So at Columbia or others, if you set up a checkpoint or hold a die-in in the quad, everyone will see it. Everyone will. Yeah. And it's poisonous and it disrupts. Here, if someone stands on a street corner holding up a sign that says, Jews control the world, or whatever, you walk up and down the streets of New York, you figure it's New York City, okay? Right. So people standing up to admit it doesn't have the same impact.
Okay.
So certainly for undergraduates, I would not say that it's poisoned the environment. It still very much feels like a safe place to be. There are things that come up, but and there are things, and I'm not minimizing that. However, it does not feel like the atmosphere as a whole has been poisoned. I would say among the graduate students who are most involved in the union, it does feel that way. It feels like their union, which is supposed to be advocating for them, has turned on them. It's become divisive. It's alienated them. It's unfairly chosen an issue for purely ideological reasons. It's not what the union is there for. And so within the graduate students who are supposed to be represented by the union, yes, that's a 10 out of 10.
Okay, interesting. Now you said in terms of the undergraduates, it's about a 4 for you. You talk to other Hillel directors across the country. What do you hear from them? Is this something you hear people complaining about, or although there are pockets of BDS movements on college campuses, would you say that when you talk to Hillel directors, whenever you have the chance to do so, even the Jewish organization at Columbia, what are you hearing? Do you hear them say they're worried? Do you hear them almost never talk about it? What?
No, they're definitely talking about it, and certainly when a BDS campaign comes to campus, they become fully engaged. We wanted to make sure that whatever was happening on a BDS front, that we were not that it did not disrupt our core operation, and that we continued to fulfill our mission of creating transformative programs for undergraduate Jewish students, in a way that would leave a lasting impact on them. So, with the help of the Israel Campus Coalition, we hired a number of graduate students to help us with this issue, and so that it could remain bracketed from our normal operation. The two things that most Hillel directors will air is, number one, that their operation has been overtaken by the BDS fight.
Mm-hmm.
And they are now seen, they're branded as a right-wing organization on campus, as a politically charged operation, and it's more difficult for them to outreach. The second thing that they complain about and that they will talk about is the sense of hesitation, especially when there are students who come from within the system, students who were in NIFTY or USY or went to Camp Rama and are now supportive of BDS and are actively so. And they don't know how to deal with those students. They want to embrace them. They want them to feel welcome, continuing coming to Shabbat or learning or other programs. And at the same time, they find themselves politically on the other side. So we made a decision not to get in front of the fight. We didn't want to be the face of the fight. We wanted to do what we could to support the graduate students who did establish the anti-BDS caucus, but we did it in such a way that our core operation was not disrupted, and that our identity remains one of an educational institution, not a political machine.
I understand. But you're talking about the Bronfman Center for Jewish Life, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yehuda, do you have children?
6.
6 children, that's right. And I don't remember their ages. From what to what?
From 2 to 13. Thank God, they're wonderful.
Okay, I'm sure they are. Okay. You know, in another, 5 years or so, your 13-year-old will be ready to go to college. There are parents who are very worried for their children going to college and having to face an anti-Israel atmosphere and a strong BDS movement on top-notch college campuses. If you had a child now who is now graduating high school, about to look for a college anywhere in the country, as a father, how concerned would you be for your son or daughter as they enter the college world?
That's a very important question, and I'm sure, and I know that there are many parents who are thinking about it. When I go speak at high schools or to high school parent bodies, it is a question that comes up. At NYU, I'd have no hesitation. I would really, when I visit a school, I would ask that question. I would ask the question to current students. I'd ask the question to the Hillel professionals who were there, because there are going to be some campuses, especially smaller ones, where whenever anyone protests, everyone sees it, and that's going to be something that they have to. Yes, those are going to be decisions that are going to be made. Like, I'm very grateful that the NYU administration came out in a quick, clear, and unequivocal way with a statement totally rejecting BDS, rejecting the claims of the demands of this resolution, without even flinching. No, they're not going to close the NYU campus in Tel Aviv, which is thriving, which is doing phenomenally, and no to academic boycotts under any circumstance. So I think we need to see leadership from university administrations, like we've seen from the NYU administration, and look, my fear, and I think the fear of many people, is that the atmosphere of American universities turns to the way it is on certain European universities, where you just you can't walk around saying you're supportive of Israel without hearing about it 24/7.
Yes.
So I think we need to protect against that, and I think we need to be smart about our activism. We need to be smart about our philanthropy, I think we need to spend some serious time researching these movements and understand that it's never going to be that um, that that this kind of radicalism that we're seeing. I don't think it's going to go away. We just have to understand it.
Yehuda, you've done such wonderful work at NYU. And I always love when I have the chance to speak with you. You have a good rest of the Chag, and you continue the good fight, and you and I will speak often. Thank you, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Be well.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yehuda Sarna, Executive Director of the Bronfman Center for Jewish Student Life at NYU. And it's interesting to hear how he describes it here on JBS. It is a problem. It is not a real problem at NYU, and although he was upset and is quoted as being astonished that the graduate student union would push for this boycott of Israel, the administration at NYU immediately repudiated it, and it had more to do with internal union politics than perhaps global diplomacy. Anyway, we will continue to stay on this. BDS is certainly an issue that troubles many American Jews, especially as it exists in any way on college campuses. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, to the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.